My name is Stephanie, and at 32 years old, I thought I had finally built a stable, independent life. After years of hard work, I purchased my dream home 2 years ago, a beautiful 3-bedroom house that I adore. My relationship with my family has always been complicated, especially with how my parents favor my younger sister Rachel. When Rachel announced her pregnancy, I was genuinely excited to become an aunt despite our history. But lately my parents have been acting strange. Nothing could have prepared me for the day they showed up with a moving truck while I was at work. Let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how this shocking betrayal unfolded. To understand the magnitude of what happened, you need to know a bit about my background. I worked relentlessly through college, often juggling 2 jobs while maintaining a full course load in computer science. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a tech company and spent 5 years climbing the ladder while saving every penny possible. By 30, I had finally saved enough for a down payment on my dream home. My house is not a mansion by any means, but it is mine. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, with a spacious backyard where I planted a garden last spring. The master bedroom is my sanctuary, decorated in calming blues and grays. I converted 1 bedroom into a home office, where I often work late into the night on freelance projects. The 3rd bedroom became a cozy guest room, with a reading nook by the window. I poured my heart into making this house a home, carefully selecting each piece of furniture, painting the walls myself, and creating a space that truly reflected who I am. Career-wise, things have been going well. I am now a senior software engineer at a respected firm with good benefits and job security. I have built a reputation for solving complex problems and mentoring junior developers. My finances are stable, and I have even started building a retirement fund. All of this I achieved through my own hard work and determination. Family dynamics in our household have always been complex. From my earliest memories, my parents showed clear preference for Rachel. When we were children, Rachel received new clothes while I got hand-me-downs. She took dance lessons while I was told they could not afford extracurriculars for both of us. During high school, my parents attended every one of Rachel's volleyball games, but missed my academic award ceremonies because they were too busy. I remember my 16th birthday when my parents promised a small gathering with a few friends. The day before, Rachel announced she wanted to go to a concert, and suddenly my birthday money was redirected to her tickets. I ended up having 2 friends over for pizza in my room while my parents drove Rachel and her friends to the concert. When I expressed disappointment, my mother said, "Your sister is more social. You understand, right?" Another revealing incident occurred during my college application process. I was accepted to several universities, including one prestigious program with a partial scholarship. My parents discouraged me from attending, saying it was too expensive and too far from home. 6 months later, when Rachel was applying to colleges, they took out a second mortgage to fund her education at an expensive private university, because, as my father put it, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Despite these painful memories, I worked hard to maintain a relationship with my family. As adults, Rachel and I developed a cordial relationship, though never as close as I wished. I accepted that my parents would always favor her, and I built my life accordingly, finding fulfillment in my career, friends, and home. 2 months ago, Rachel announced her pregnancy at a family dinner. She and her husband Justin had been married for 3 years, and this was their first child. Despite our complicated history, I was genuinely happy for her. A baby would bring new joy to our family, and I looked forward to being an aunt. Rachel and Justin lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment in the city. Not ideal for a growing family, but manageable. After her announcement, I offered to help with baby shopping, and even hosted a small gathering at my house to celebrate the news. It was around this time that I noticed the first red flags. My mother casually mentioned how my house was too big for just one person, while helping me clear dishes after dinner. My father walked through my home office, nodding thoughtfully before commenting, "This would make a perfect nursery, all that morning sunlight." These comments struck me as odd, but I dismissed them, focusing instead on being supportive of Rachel during her pregnancy. I accompanied her to a baby store, where we looked at cribs and changing tables. I even purchased a beautiful rocking chair as an early gift which she seemed genuinely grateful for. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to the subtle shift in my parents' and sisters' behavior. The seeds of what was to come were already being planted, but I was too busy seeing what I wanted to see: a family coming together to welcome a new member. About 6 weeks after the pregnancy announcement, I received a strange call from Rachel. She asked to confirm my exact address for a surprise delivery. This struck me as odd, since Rachel had visited my house countless times and certainly knew where I lived. When I questioned her, she became flustered and quickly changed the subject to her recent ultrasound appointment. At the next family dinner, I noticed Rachel and my parents whispering in the kitchen. They immediately stopped when I entered to help with dessert. My mother busied herself with cutting pie, while my father suddenly became very interested in his phone. Rachel avoided eye contact completely. "Everything okay in here?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Of course, sweetie," my mother answered too quickly. "Rachel was just telling us about her doctor appointment yesterday." The atmosphere felt tense, but I could not put my finger on why. The rest of the evening passed with forced conversation and an underlying current of secrecy that made me increasingly uncomfortable. The following weekend, my parents showed up unannounced at my house. This was unusual, as they typically called before visiting. My father carried a tape measure which he claimed was for a project at home, yet proceeded to measure several doorways and rooms in my house. "Dad, what are you doing?" I asked, as he measured the width of my home office doorway. "Just curious if standard doors are the same width in newer homes," he answered vaguely. Meanwhile, my mother was taking photos of my living room and kitchen on her phone. When I questioned her, she claimed she was getting ideas for redecorating their guest room. This explanation made little sense, as their home had a completely different layout and style than mine. Before leaving, my father asked pointed questions about my mortgage interest rate and whether I had considered how much equity I had built in the house. My mother commented again about how a single person really does not need this much space. Their behavior left me feeling unsettled. Later that evening, I called my best friend Lauren to share my concerns. "It sounds like they are planning something," Lauren said after listening to my account, "and it does not sound like something you are going to like." The next day, I was using my parents' iPad that they had left at my house to look up a recipe when a notification popped up. It was an email confirmation for a real estate listing appointment at a studio apartment downtown. The contact information listed was my father's phone number. I felt a chill run through me. Why would my parents be looking at studio apartments? Scrolling through the browser history, I found multiple searches for studio apartments near downtown, how to help family member downsize, and legal rights of homeowners versus family members. Each discovery made my stomach twist further. When I confronted my parents over the phone about what I had found, my mother became defensive. "We were just doing some research. Your father and I are thinking about downsizing ourselves," she said unconvincingly. "Then why does the appointment confirmation have a note saying, 'Perfect for Stephanie'?" I asked. The line went silent for a moment before my mother sighed. "Honey, we just think that with Rachel having a baby, it might make sense for everyone if you moved somewhere more appropriate for your lifestyle. That big house is wasted on just you." I was stunned into silence. They had been planning to move me out of my own home without even discussing it with me. When I finally found my voice, I told them clearly that I had no intention of moving, and that they needed to respect my boundaries and my property. "You are being selfish," my father replied. "Family should help family. Rachel needs space for the baby." That same evening, Rachel called me in tears about not having enough space in her apartment for all the baby furniture they wanted to buy. "We just do not know where we will put everything," she sobbed. "The nursery barely fits a crib and changing table, let alone the glider and dresser and toy chest." Wanting to be supportive despite my growing concerns, I offered a compromise. "I could store some items temporarily in my guest room if you need. But Rachel, I need you to understand, that is a temporary solution." "That is so sweet of you," Rachel responded suddenly, sounding much cheerier. We will figure out the details later. Something about her rapid mood shift left me uneasy. When I tried to establish clearer boundaries about what I was and was not offering, Rachel quickly ended the call, claiming she had another incoming call. My parents called the next day, and when I attempted to discuss my concerns about their apartment hunting, they dismissed me entirely. "You are overthinking things," my mother said. "We were just exploring options." "All families make sacrifices for each other," my father added. "When you have your own children someday, you will understand." These conversations left me anxious and struggling to sleep. I began having nightmares about coming home to find my belongings on the curb and strangers living in my house. The stress began affecting my work performance, and I found myself checking my home security app frequently throughout the day. The whole situation felt surreal. How could my own family be plotting to remove me from my home without my consent? I began to question whether I was overreacting or misinterpreting their intentions. But each new interaction only confirmed my growing suspicions that something was very wrong. After a particularly stressful week of dodging calls from my family, I had to travel out of town for a business conference. The 2-day trip came at the worst possible time, but I could not reschedule without jeopardizing an important client relationship. Before leaving, I double-checked all my locks and set my security system. When I returned Sunday evening, I was horrified to find a stack of flattened moving boxes leaning against my front porch, with a note from my mother. "Thought these might be helpful. Love, Mom." I immediately called my parents, hands shaking with anger. "What are these boxes doing at my house?" I demanded, when my father answered. "Your mother thought she would help you get started packing," he replied casually, as if this was a perfectly normal thing to do. "We found a great studio downtown. Hardwood floors, walking distance to restaurants. Perfect for your lifestyle." "Dad, I am not moving," I stated firmly. "I never agreed to this. This is my house that I bought with my own money." "Now, Stephanie," he said in the condescending tone he had used, "since I was a child, be reasonable. Rachel needs a proper family home for the baby. You are single with no children. It just makes sense for everyone." Before I could respond further, I received a text from Rachel with photos of an elaborate nursery furniture set. The message read, "Just ordered this. Cannot wait to set it up at your place next weekend." My heart pounding, I ended the call with my father and sat down to process what was happening. This was no longer just strange behavior. My family was actively planning to take over my home without my consent. The next morning, I called in sick to work and began searching through my email for any communication between my parents and me about my house. I discovered several concerning messages I had missed or forgotten. In one, my mother had asked for a digital copy of my house key in case of emergencies. In another, my father had inquired about the name of my mortgage company for tax purposes. Most alarmingly, I found an email chain between my parents and Rachel that I had been blind copied on, presumably by accident. The subject line read "Stephanie's House Transition Plan," and it contained detailed discussions about how Stephanie's house is perfect for a growing family, and how they would help her see that this is the best solution for everyone. There was mention of a lease agreement for a studio apartment and plans to move me out gradually over the next month. My sister had even written, "The master bedroom has perfect lighting for nursing, and the backyard is exactly what we want for when the baby starts crawling." With growing dread, I checked my mailbox and found a letter from a property management company I did not recognize. Inside was a lease agreement for a studio apartment, with what appeared to be my signature forged at the bottom. They had gone so far as to create fraudulent documents in my name. That evening, Rachel came by, unannounced, claiming she wanted to check on me after hearing I was sick. Once inside, she quickly revealed her true purpose. "So, have you started packing yet?" Mom said she dropped off boxes yesterday. I took a deep breath and decided to be completely direct. "Rachel, I am not moving. This is my house. I am not giving it to you." Her friendly demeanor instantly changed. But we already put a deposit down on that studio for you. It is really nice, you know. And Justin and I need more space now that the baby is coming. That is not my problem, I replied, struggling to remain calm. I am sorry you do not have enough space, but that does not give you the right to take my home. Rachel's face hardened. You do not need all this space anyway. It is just you. We are going to be a family of 3. I need you to leave, I said, moving toward the door. You are being incredibly selfish, she snapped. After everything our parents have done for you, you cannot even do this one thing to help the family. Think about your niece or nephew. After Rachel left, my parents called. They alternated between guilt-tripping and anger, suggesting I was mentally unstable for not wanting to help the family. When I stood firm, they resorted to the silent treatment, with my mother tearfully saying they would give me time to come to my senses. The stress began to take a serious toll. I lost weight, struggled to concentrate at work, and jumped every time my phone rang. My coworkers noticed something was wrong with my manager Laura, pulling me aside to ask if everything was okay. Family issues, I explained, vaguely unwilling to admit the full bizarre situation. Laura looked concerned. Whatever it is, take care of yourself, and let me know if you need any time off. That evening I sat in my home office, surrounded by the life I had built through years of hard work. The thought of being pushed out to make way for my sister filled me with both sadness and determination. I would not be bullied out of my own home, even by my own family. It was time to set firm boundaries, no matter how painful the consequences might be. 3 days after the confrontation with Rachel, I was in a meeting at work when my phone buzzed repeatedly. My neighbor Diane was calling, which was unusual during work hours. Concerned, I stepped out to take the call. Stephanie, there is a delivery truck outside your house, Diane said, her voice tense. They are unloading baby furniture. Your parents are directing them where to put things. I thought you should know. My blood ran cold. I will be right there, I managed to say, before rushing to my manager to explain I had a home emergency. The 20-minute drive felt like hours. As I turned onto my street, I saw exactly what Diane had described: a large delivery truck in my driveway, its back doors open. Beside it was a rental moving truck I had never seen before. My parents' car was parked on the street, along with Rachel and Justin's SUV. I parked haphazardly and ran toward my house. The front door was open, and delivery men were carrying a white crib through it. Inside, I found a scene that stopped me in my tracks. My parents were in my living room directing traffic like they owned the place. Rachel and Justin were in my guest room, which had been partially emptied of my belongings. Justin was applying blue paint to one wall. What is going on here? I demanded, my voice shaking. My mother turned, her face lighting up as if this was a happy surprise. Stephanie, you are home early. Surprise. We are helping you move this weekend. Is not that wonderful? The studio is all ready for you, my father added. We packed most of your essentials already. The moving truck is nearly loaded. I pushed past them to look in my garage. Sure enough, it was filled with boxes labeled with my belongings. They had been packing my things while I was at work. How did you get in? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. We had a key made from that copy you gave us for emergencies, my mother explained casually. We have been getting things ready all week while you were at work. I returned to the guest room, where Rachel was arranging stuffed animals on a shelf that had previously held my books. My books were nowhere to be seen. Where are my things? I asked. We packed your important stuff, Rachel replied. Some of the decorative items we donated since the studio is much smaller. But do not worry, we kept all the family photos and sentimental things. I stood frozen as I processed her words. They had been in my house without permission, touching my belongings, making decisions about what to keep and what to discard. The violation felt physical, like a blow to my stomach. Justin looked up from his painting, seeming to notice my distress for the first time. The nursery is going to look great. We really appreciate you doing this for us, Stephanie. I never agreed to this, I said, finding my voice at last. I never said you could have my house. My father entered the room, his expression stern. Now, Stephanie, we have discussed this. This is what is best for the family. Rachel needs a proper home for the baby. I did not agree to anything. I shouted, my composure finally breaking. This is my house. You cannot just decide to take it. Lower your voice, my mother scolded. You are being dramatic. We found you a lovely studio apartment. Many single people live in much less space. Rachel placed a hand on her pregnant belly, her go-to move, when she wanted to end an argument in her favor. Think about the baby, Stephanie. Do you really want your niece or nephew growing up in a cramped apartment when there is a perfectly good house available? This house is available because I bought it, I replied. With my money, that I earned. None of you have any right to be here moving my things without permission. My father stepped closer, his voice lowering to the authoritative tone he had used throughout my childhood. You have two choices, Stephanie. You can be a good sister and aunt and accept this transition gracefully, or you can continue this selfish behavior and be cut off from the family. Is that what you want? To never see your niece or nephew? The ultimatum hung in the air. A delivery man awkwardly sidled past us, carrying what looked like parts of a changing table. In my bedroom, I could hear my mother opening and closing drawers. The room began to spin slightly as the magnitude of the betrayal hit me. My own family had conspired behind my back, entered my home without permission, packed and discarded my belongings, and now were threatening to cut me off if I did not surrender everything I had worked for. I felt my chest tighten and my breathing become shallow. Recognizing the beginning of a panic attack, I steadied myself against the wall. Rachel watched with what looked like irritation rather than concern. Are you seriously going to make this about you right now? She asked. I am 7 months pregnant. This stress is not good for the baby. Something in me snapped at that moment. The final thread of familial obligation broke as I realized these people cared nothing for my well-being or my rights. They saw me only as a resource to be used for Rachel's benefit. I walked into my bedroom to find my mother sorting through my jewelry box. Scattered across my bed were photos, keepsakes, and personal mementos she had deemed worthy of keeping. The rest of my possessions were either in boxes or apparently discarded. This was the final straw. No more reasoning, no more pleading, no more hoping they would see my side. It was time to take action. With shaking hands, I took out my phone and dialed 911. What are you doing? My mother asked her, eyes widening as she realized who I was calling. I need to report people in my home without permission removing my property, I told the dispatcher, my voice surprisingly steady. I gave my address and confirmed I was the homeowner. The police. Really, Stephanie, my father scoffed. Do not be ridiculous. I ignored him and continued speaking with the dispatcher, who assured me officers would arrive shortly. After ending the call, I turned to face my family. You all need to stop what you are doing right now, I stated firmly. You are trespassing in my home and attempting to remove my property without consent. That is illegal. We are your family, my mother exclaimed, her voice rising in pitch. Family helps each other. Family does not steal from each other, I countered. Family does not forge signatures on lease agreements or make copies of keys without permission. Rachel began to cry, her hands cradling her belly. I cannot believe you would do this to me in my condition. Do you want me to lose the baby from stress? Even in my anger, I recognized the manipulation tactic for what it was. Rachel had used her fragile state to get her way since childhood, long before she was actually pregnant. The delivery men need to take all the baby furniture back, I said calmly. And everyone needs to stop packing my things immediately. Justin, looking increasingly uncomfortable, put down his paint roller. Maybe we should go, he muttered to Rachel, who shot him a venomous look. We are not going anywhere, she snapped. This is going to be our house. Stephanie is just having one of her selfish moments. My father puffed up his chest. The police will side with us when they understand the situation. A pregnant woman needs a proper home, more than a single woman needs excess space. Despite his confident words, I noticed he was nervously checking his watch. My mother had begun hurriedly replacing items from my jewelry box, as if erasing evidence of their invasion. 15 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. Officer Garcia and Officer Patterson introduced themselves and asked everyone to gather in the living room. The delivery men, sensing the tension, had retreated to their truck to wait. "Can you explain what is happening here?" Officer Garcia asked me. Taking a deep breath, I explained the situation as clearly and factually as possible. I showed them my deed to the house, explained that I had never given permission for anyone to move my belongings or bring in baby furniture, and that my signature had been forged on a lease agreement for an apartment I had never seen. My parents immediately jumped in, talking over each other in an attempt to paint me as mentally unstable and ungrateful. "Our daughter is having some emotional problems," my father explained confidentially to Officer Patterson. "She agreed to this arrangement weeks ago, and now is changing her mind. We are just trying to help everyone in the family." "She has always been jealous of her sister," my mother added. "This is just another attempt to hurt Rachel during her pregnancy." Rachel, right on cue, began sobbing dramatically. "I do not understand why she hates me and the baby so much," she wailed. "We just need a safe place for our child." Officer Garcia remained impassive as she turned to me. "Do you have documentation showing you are the legal owner of this property?" I retrieved my deed and mortgage statements from my home office, along with identification, proving I was the person named on those documents. The officers reviewed them carefully. "And did you give verbal or written permission for your family to move your belongings, or bring in new furniture?" Officer Patterson asked. "Absolutely not," I stated firmly. "I have repeatedly told them I have no intention of giving up my home. They entered without my knowledge while I was at work, using a key they made without my permission." The officers conferred briefly before addressing the room. Officer Garcia spoke first. "Based on the documentation and statements, Miss Williams is the legal owner of this property. Without her explicit permission, removing her belongings or making alterations to the property constitutes trespassing and potentially theft." "But we are her parents," my mother protested. "That does not grant you legal rights to the property," Officer Patterson explained patiently. "As the homeowner, Miss Williams has the right to decide who can enter her home and under what circumstances." My father attempted to argue further, but the officers remained firm. They informed my family that they needed to leave the premises, immediately return any keys they had made, and cease attempts to remove my property. The baby furniture would need to be returned to the delivery company, and any of my belongings already loaded onto the moving truck would need to be brought back inside. Rachel made one last dramatic appeal, clutching her belly and claiming the stress might send her into early labor. Officer Garcia, unimpressed, offered to call an ambulance if Rachel felt she needed medical attention. "That will not be necessary," Rachel muttered suddenly, recovering from her distress. Under the officer's supervision, my parents Rachel and Justin gathered their personal items. The delivery men were instructed to take the baby furniture back. My father was forced to unlock the moving truck, revealing boxes of my belongings that would need to be returned to the house. As they prepared to leave, my mother approached me, tears streaming down her face. "I cannot believe you would do this to your own family," she whispered. "What will people think when they hear you called the police on your pregnant sister?" "I did not call the police on Rachel," I replied calmly. "I called them on people who were trying to steal my home and belongings. If you are concerned about how this looks, perhaps you should have considered that before breaking into my house." The officers remained until my family had left and the delivery truck had departed. They advised me to change my locks immediately and document any further attempts by my family to enter my property without permission. They also suggested I might want to consider a restraining order if the harassment continued. After everyone had gone, I stood in my partially disassembled home, surrounded by boxes and the faint smell of wet paint in my guest room. The silence was deafening after the chaos of the day. Despite the mess, I felt a profound sense of relief. I had stood up for myself. I had protected what was mine. That evening, my neighbor Diane came by with a homemade lasagna and a bottle of wine. "Thought you might not feel like cooking," she said kindly. "And I figured you could use a friend right now." As we sat in my kitchen eating dinner, I felt the first tentative moments of peace. The road ahead would be difficult, navigating the family fallout, restoring my home, processing the betrayal, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. "Thank you for calling me today," I told Diane. "I do not know what would have happened if you had not." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "That is what real support looks like," she said. "Not taking but protecting what matters to someone else." That night, after installing new locks on all my doors, I slept in my own bed, in my own home, secure in the knowledge that I had finally established boundaries that even my family could not cross. The day after the police intervention, the texts and calls began flooding in. My parents alternated between angry tirades and tearful pleas. Rachel sent long guilt-inducing messages about how I had ruined everything for her baby. Extended family members who had heard a carefully edited version of events called to express their shock at my cruelty. I let most calls go to voicemail, needing time to process my emotions before engaging. The few texts I did respond to were brief and factual. I did not call the police on Rachel. I called them because people were removing my belongings from my home without permission. 3 days after the incident, my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. It was my Aunt Janet, my father's sister, whom I had always been fond of, but rarely saw due to geographical distance. "Stephanie, honey. I heard there was some drama," she said when I answered. "Your mother called me in tears, but her story had some holes in it. Want to tell me your side?" For the first time since the ordeal began, I felt safe enough to share the full story with a family member. Aunt Janet listened without interruption, only occasionally making sounds of disbelief. "This does not surprise me one bit," she sighed when I finished. "Your father and mother have always had boundary issues. They did something similar to your cousin Mark years ago, trying to pressure him into letting your grandmother move into his condo. He refused, and was labeled the bad grandson for months. Her validation was like cool water on a burn. So you do not think I overreacted by calling the police?" I asked hesitantly. "Honey, they broke into your house and were stealing your things. What were you supposed to do? Help them load the truck?" Her matter-of-fact response made me laugh for the first time in weeks. Before ending the call, Aunt Janet promised to try to talk some sense into my parents, though she was not optimistic about changing their perspective. They believe they are entitled to control their children's lives no matter how old you get. This was never about Rachel needing a bigger place. This was about them asserting control over you. Her words stayed with me as I scheduled an appointment with a therapist specializing in family dynamics. During our first session, Dr. Bennett helped me understand that my feelings of guilt were a programmed response to setting healthy boundaries. "Your family trained you to put their needs above your own," she explained. "When you assert your legitimate rights, they respond with escalating pressure to force you back into compliance. This is not healthy or normal family behavior." Over the next few weeks, I worked with Dr. Bennett to process my complex emotions and establish strategies for maintaining boundaries. Meanwhile, the situation with my family continued to evolve in unexpected ways. 2 weeks after the incident, my parents showed up at my workplace unannounced. They approached the reception desk, asking to see me, claiming it was a family emergency. Fortunately, my manager Laura intercepted them before they could cause a scene. "Your daughter is in meetings all day," she informed them smoothly, despite knowing I was at my desk. "I would be happy to have her call you when she is available." When they refused to leave, Laura had security escort them from the building. She came to my desk afterward, concern evident in her expression. "Are you having serious family problems?" she asked gently, because that did not look like normal parent behavior to me. I briefly explained the situation, embarrassed but grateful for her support. "Take whatever time you need to sort this out," she said firmly, "and let me know if you need help with a restraining order. My sister is a lawyer who specializes in family issues." Taking Laura up on her offer, I consulted with her sister Jennifer, who helped me draft a cease and desist letter to my parents. The letter formally requested they stop entering my property, attempting to remove my belongings, or contacting my workplace. Jennifer warned me that such letters often do not deter determined family members, but it would establish a paper trail if I needed legal protection in the future. The letter had an unexpected effect. Rather than deterring my parents, it seemed to shock them into realizing the seriousness of the situation. 3 days after they received it, my father called with a different tone than before. "We may have overstepped," he admitted grudgingly. "We were only trying to help Rachel, but perhaps we should have discussed it with you more thoroughly." It was not exactly an apology, but it was the closest thing to acknowledgement of wrongdoing I had received. I responded carefully, explaining that overstepped was a significant understatement for what they had done, and that rebuilding trust would require them to respect my clearly stated boundaries. The conversation ended without resolution, but it felt like a tiny step toward a new kind of relationship, one where I held firm to my boundaries, and they began to recognize them as legitimate. A few days later, I received a surprising text from Justin, Rachel's husband. He asked if we could meet for coffee, without Rachel or my parents knowing. Curious and cautious, I agreed to meet at a cafe far from where any family members might spot us. Justin looked exhausted when he arrived, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy about him. After ordering drinks, he got straight to the point. "I want to apologize for my part in what happened," he said, staring into his coffee. "I never felt right about the plan, but Rachel and your parents were so convinced it was the only solution that I went along with it. Watching you come home and find us in your house that day, I have never felt more ashamed." His sincerity took me by surprise. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. He ran a hand through his hair. "Because I realized I do not want to raise our child in an environment where boundaries mean nothing, and taking what is not yours is justified as family helping family. That is not the kind of values I want to teach." Justin explained that since the incident, Rachel and my parents had been obsessively searching for other houses, rejecting perfectly good options because they were not as nice as my home. The entitlement in their attitude had forced him to see the situation from a different perspective. "I am trying to talk sense into Rachel," he said. "She is still angry and hurt, but I think once the baby comes, her focus will shift. At least I hope so." Our conversation gave me a glimmer of hope that at least one person in my family circle understood the importance of boundaries and respect. Before leaving, Justin asked if I would be willing to meet with Rachel once things had calmed down. I agreed to consider it, recognizing that my relationship with my future niece or nephew was worth attempting reconciliation, even if it had to be on new terms. 2 weeks later, I received a text from Rachel asking if we could talk. We met at a neutral location, a park with plenty of benches, where we could have privacy without being in either of our homes. Rachel was now nearly 8 months pregnant, and despite my lingering anger, I felt a pang, seeing her struggle to lower herself onto the bench. The conversation was difficult. Rachel oscillated between genuine remorse and entitled justification. "I still think you could have helped us out," she said at one point. "But Justin made me see that trying to take your house without permission was wrong." It was not the full accountability I had hoped for, but it was a start. We ended the meeting with a tentative agreement to begin rebuilding our relationship, with the understanding that it would look different than before. I would be an aunt to her child, but my home was permanently off limits for solutions to her housing needs. As for my parents, they made several attempts at reconciliation, though none included a genuine acknowledgement of how severely they had violated my trust. Their idea of making amends was to suggest we all just move forward and forget about the unpleasantness. Dr. Bennett helped me see that without true accountability, reconciliation would only set me up for future boundary violations. I decided to maintain limited contact with my parents, with clear guidelines about what topics were open for discussion and what behaviors would result in me ending communication. It was painful but necessary to protect myself from further emotional harm. Throughout this difficult period, I found unexpected support. Coworkers invited me to dinners and weekend activities. Neighbors checked in regularly. Even acquaintances from my yoga class sensed something was wrong and made efforts to include me in their social plans. I began to see that family could be something you create, not just something you are born into. As the weeks passed, I gradually reclaimed my home, repainting the wall in my guest room, reorganizing my belongings, and adding new security features. Each small act of restoration helped heal the sense of violation I had experienced. My house became not just a home again, but a symbol of my independence and self-respect. 6 months after the moving truck incident, my life had found a new equilibrium. My home was once again my sanctuary, with additional security measures providing peace of mind. I had repainted several rooms, rearranged furniture, and added personal touches that made the space feel fresh and fully mine again. The journey had not been easy. There were nights I questioned whether standing up to my family had been worth the pain of altered relationships. There were moments I nearly gave in to the pressure to just apologize and move on without addressing the fundamental boundary violations. But with each passing week, my resolve strengthened, and my sense of self-worth grew. One Tuesday afternoon, I was shopping at the local grocery store when I turned a corner and nearly bumped my cart into Rachel's. Sidon. She had her newborn daughter Emma in a carrier against her chest. We both froze for a moment, surprised by the unexpected encounter. "Hi," I said, finally breaking the silence. "Hi," she replied, adjusting the baby's tiny hat. This is Emma. She is 3 weeks old." Despite everything that had happened, I felt a surge of emotion looking at my niece's tiny face. "She is beautiful," I said sincerely. Rachel hesitated, then asked, "Would you like to hold her?" I carefully took the sleeping infant, marveling at her perfect features and the weight of her in my arms. In that moment, I knew I wanted a relationship with this child, even if it meant finding a way forward with Rachel. "We found a house," Rachel said as I handed Emma back. "It is not as nice as yours, but it has 3 bedrooms and a small yard. We moved in last week." I nodded, genuinely glad they had found a suitable place. "That is great. I am happy for you." Before parting, we exchanged tentative smiles and agreed to text about a potential visit soon. It was a small step, but an important one, in rebuilding a relationship on new, healthier terms. My relationship with my parents remained more complicated. They still struggled to understand or respect my boundaries, often testing them in subtle ways. During our limited interactions, they would make comments like, "When are you going to get over that silly moving incident?" or, "You always were too sensitive about your things." Dr. Bennett helped me develop strategies for these situations, including direct responses like, "It was not a silly incident. It was a serious violation of my home and trust," and knowing when to end conversations that became manipulative. Over time, I noticed small signs of progress. My father stopped offering unsolicited advice about my house. My mother occasionally caught herself before making entitled comments about my space or possessions. They were learning, albeit slowly, that my boundaries were non-negotiable. Through therapy, I gained valuable insights about myself and my family dynamics. I recognized how their treatment had led me to doubt my own perceptions and needs, a pattern Dr. Bennett identified as gaslighting. I learned that setting boundaries was not selfish, but essential for healthy relationships. Most importantly, I discovered that standing up for myself did not make me a bad daughter or sister, it made me a healthy adult. As spring arrived, I decided to redecorate my home to truly reflect my personality and needs. I converted the guest room that had nearly become a nursery into a creative space for my photography hobby. I planted new flowers in the garden and built a small meditation area under the shade of an oak tree. Each change reinforced that this was my space created according to my vision. Through a support group for adult children of controlling parents, I found community with others who understood my experiences. The validation and shared wisdom helped me feel less alone in my journey. Many group members had similar stories of family members who felt entitled to their homes, money, or time, and learning how they had established healthy boundaries gave me practical tools for my own situation. Slowly, I began dating again, something I had put on hold during the family crisis. I met Michael, a kind and thoughtful engineer, who demonstrated respect for my space and boundaries from our first date. When I eventually shared the story of my family's behavior, his shocked reaction helped confirm that my experience had indeed been extreme and inappropriate. In a healthy family, no one would ever think they had the right to take your home, he said simply. That is not love, that is control. 8 months after the incident, I received an invitation to Emma's christening. After careful consideration and consultation with Dr. Bennett, I decided to attend. The event would be my first time seeing my entire family in one setting since the confrontation. The day was tense but manageable. Extended family members who had initially judged me harshly had heard more balanced versions of events over time, and several approached with subtle support. Aunt Janet stayed by my side throughout much of the ceremony, a silent ally in potentially difficult moments. Rachel made an effort to include me, asking me to take photos since she knew about my photography hobby. It was a small gesture of recognition and respect that meant more than she probably realized. As I watched Emma in her christening gown, I reflected on what kind of aunt I wanted to be. Someone who showed her the importance of self-respect and healthy boundaries, who demonstrated that love does not require self-sacrifice or submission. I hoped that by maintaining my boundaries with Rachel and my parents, I might help break a cycle that could otherwise continue into the next generation. In the year since that terrible day when I came home to find my family attempting to take over my house, I had learned profound lessons about family love and self-worth. I learned that true love includes respect for boundaries and autonomy. I discovered that family relationships should be based on mutual respect, not obligation or control. Most importantly, I realized that building the life you want sometimes means protecting it from the people who claim to love you, but try to mold you to their expectations. Today, my home remains my sanctuary, earned through hard work and protected through courage. My relationships with family continue to evolve with new boundaries, creating safer, healthier connections. And I have found a sense of peace I never knew was possible when I finally gave myself permission to define what family means on my own terms. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who felt entitled to your space or possessions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Remember that establishing healthy boundaries is not selfish. It is an act of self-respect that ultimately creates the foundation for genuine relationships. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps anyone facing similar challenges to find the courage to stand up for themselves.